Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. I am not going to make you clap. So I was asked why I do what I do, and I feel it's a bit of a tough question to answer. And in order to do it, I'm going to take you on a bit of a walk, I apologize, through my life. I was born and raised in Toronto, downtown Toronto. A similar time to Andrea. The 70s, and raised by hippies. My father was a drug dealer, I'm just going to say it. I spent most of my teen years trying very hard not to buy drugs from him. I'm an 8th generation new Canadian. I often say that my family didn't come here on a boat, they came here on the boat. But my family has been in Canada a long time. I was taught from a very young age that I should be an advocate, that I had a right and a responsibility to not stand on the sidelines, to do something to help people. And my journey in what we now call diversity and inclusion began when I was 4 years old. And my mother took me to a protest, and I hesitated to say the name, but I'm going to say the name. It was a protest against Nestle Foods, because they had a rather unpleasant business practice that I won't get into. But there I was, 4 years old, carrying a picket sign. The sign was bigger than me. But I knew why I was there. I wasn't there because Mom said, you have to be there. I was there because this company was doing something wrong, and it was my job to bring the world's attention to it. Through school, I was always involved in schools, whether it was the yearbook or the band or whatever it was. And then in 1986, at the ripe age of 16, I came out of the closet as gay, to the surprise of no one. I was a very young man who knew the entire score to a chorus line. It's not a secret. When I was 18, I became the executive director of the Lesbian and Gay Youth of Toronto. That was followed by some volunteer time with the AIDS Committee of Toronto, what we thought was in the middle of the AIDS epidemic. Little late there. I moved to New York City, where I got involved with the New York City Gay and Lesbian Anti-Violence Project. My entire life, I have been involved some way, shape, or form doing volunteer work in the community, whether it was in my own community, in the LGBT community, with people with disabilities, with women, or with newcomers. I'm a big advocate for newcomers. I believe that if anybody chooses to live in this ice rock of a country, particularly what's going on outside, we should help them, not because it's the right thing to do, but because it's the right thing to do for Canada, to allow people to be the best that they can be. So let's jump to 2005, when I started my job at KPMG. Now, I didn't start in diversity. I started in IT consulting. That's right. I'm not an HR guy. In fact, my profession for 20-something years that paid was in IT. But I ended up, long story short, writing the business case for the creation of a full-time job in diversity and inclusion at the firm, and became the first chief diversity officer for the firm. In 2007, I started an organization called Pride at Work Canada, which works with employers to create inclusive workplaces for their LGBT employees. It now has about 60-something partners and operates across the country. In 2008, I again wrote a business case and became the Deputy Chief Diversity Officer for KPMG International, working with the firms in 140-plus countries around the world. All of a sudden, I had a job doing what I loved. I did the thing that I think a lot of people aspire to do. I blended my passion with my profession. Suddenly, people were paying me to do this, which is kind of nuts. In 2010, I left my secondment with KPMG International, moved back into my Canadian role, and I started to think about this thing called diversity and inclusion. I'd spent 2.5 years in the hull of an airplane moving around the world thinking about diversity globally, and I now had an opportunity to think about it in our own context. And really, diversity and inclusion is the Wild West. It's what HR was about 30 years ago. People are starting to pay attention to it. They are starting to make it a business priority. We hear CEOs having conversations about diversity and inclusion in the same way that they used to talk about the balance sheet. And with that, I felt that we needed some structure around this conversation. So after many glasses of wine and writing on the backs of napkins, I started the Canadian Institute of Diversity and Inclusion, or CIDI. We do not say CD, for what I feel are obvious reasons, but people still do. If you haven't heard of us, not to worry, we're only about 2 years old. You may remember a little video public service that we did in February during the Olympics. A couple losers, Don't You Want Me Baby. There's like 10 million hits, whatever. But the importance of that video was to draw attention to the treatment of lesbian, gay, bisexual, and trans people in Russia. Again, me and my sign. On February 25th, 2013, 9 days before my 8-year anniversary at KPMG, I left the firm to join this new startup, the Canadian Institute of Diversity and Inclusion. I was employee number 5. So what do? We assist employers with their diversity and inclusion journey. That's kind of the headline. But our goal is to help make workplaces more welcoming for all people so that they can succeed. And my belief is that if we can focus on the workplaces, everything else will come along. Because in a workplace, we can mandate diversity training. We can mandate cross-cultural competence training. If you show up and tell your neighbor that they should take some diversity training, it may not go so well. But it will inevitably affect the rest of society. We do a number of things. We put on community of practice, networking, best practice sharing events in 8 cities across the country. We have monthly webinars. We have a conference that we do in 4 cities. In fact, coming up in December in Vancouver, in January in Montreal. We have a knowledge repository. We have stuff. We have things for employers to help move that conversation along. We work with over 55 employers as employer partners, and then several dozen other companies that we do work with. As of January of this year, we entered into an operating relationship with an organization called the Canadian Centre for Diversity, formerly the Canadian Council for Christians and Jews, that frankly was shutting their doors. And I felt that that was a mistake because their work is on diversity and inclusion in high schools. And I felt that in not having that service, it was going to impact our work. So as of January of 2015, we will officially become the Canadian Centre for Diversity and Inclusion, a merged organization, and our new slogan is diversity and inclusion from backpack to briefcase. Yeah, it was, we're not that creative, let's just say it. But the goal is the entire life cycle of an individual from high school all the way through into the workplace. So why do I do what I do? I left a really cushy job on Bay Street with a really nice, expensive account. The not-for-profit world does not pay well. I'm going to say that. Some of you know that. I didn't have a choice. The demand for what my organization does was so extreme so quickly that I had no choice but to resign and join the organization as a full-time employee. I was doing it off the side of my desk, and it took over my desk. But more importantly, I really don't feel like I had a choice because it's what gets me out of bed in the morning. I get to go to work every day and change people's lives, and that's awesome. Why wouldn't people want to do that? My husband's an accountant. I know. And he hates his job. He hated his job. He now works for us. He's a director of operations. No nepotism there. Maybe a little bit. And he loves it. He loves getting out of bed every day because we change people's lives. I really feel like I have the best job in the world because I get to change people's lives. And I know that when I leave this earthly plane at some point, hopefully, I will have left it in a slightly better place than I found it. Thank you very much.